All right, everybody, welcome. You all right?
Yeah, my bad.
Still live?
We're
Okay,
doing it
all
on the
good.
fly.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, everybody, welcome into another live edition, as you can see, on the Fly Fantasy Football Podcast, powered by Fantrax. All right, glad we got that intro in there. A little premature, but it's okay. We do things here on the fly, quite literally on the fly. That's right, everybody. We had so much fun last week live here on the fly that we thought, why not do it again? We obviously were introducing Nick Scripp, our new NFL content lead. Last time he is not with us, but we might just have to make this a regular thing. So hopefully he'll be back. If you don't catch us live, of course, look for the Fly Fantasy Football Podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, feel free to subscribe, rate, review, whatever you have to say about the fly. It helps us out a lot. We love to hear your feedback, and we appreciate it all. So let's get this thing really started here for the Commissioner Think Tank Part 1. I'm Colin McTamaney, joined by my co-host, Sean Malone. Sean, how was your weekend? What's new out there on Fantrax from you? And why don't you go ahead and just introduce our viewers and listeners what the Commissioner Think Tank Part 1 is all about?
Yeah, so this is the time of year where, we've been talking about players and who we like, who we don't like. But if we're going to be honest with ourselves, not a lot of teams are drafting sometime around July 11th. Scott Fishbowl, I know, does. They do an early start to the season, but probably if I had to guesstimate, 90% of leagues, I would say, draft in about August. So we decided to do a two-part podcast here, speaking strictly about, league rules and, how to be a good commissioner, things like that, prizes, punishments, all the good stuff that go into things like that you're getting out of the way now while you're getting ready for your season to get going. So this is going to be a great episode for the commissioners in your league. And if you get some ideas from our show that you share with your league, feel free to share the podcast along with it as well. Maybe we'll pick up a few listeners on the way.
Yeah, I just actually shared the podcast here live on Fantrax. We're doing the fly on my Twitter account at Colin_McT. You can see it right there. And like you said, Sean, this show is for commissioners old and new. Some people might be taking their first crack at it. Some people might be playing in their first fantasy football league. I know one of my first leagues ever, I said, you know what? I want to do this with my friends. I'll be the commissioner. So that was one way for me to get started. And I had no idea what I was doing. So hopefully, like you said here on the fly, we can get some people get their brain moving a little bit. So let's talk about first rule changes if you're in an existing league. And the unofficial start to the fantasy football season was this past weekend for many. The Scott Fishbowl Tournament, SFB 13 on Twitter. I actually participated in a live draft on Sunday in Philadelphia with about 100 people. It was an absolute blast. We did about 10 rounds. There were 4 divisions there drafting. There's about 250 to 300 divisions worldwide. So it's a pretty big deal. And what makes Scott Fishbowl so great is that all of the proceeds along the way go to fantasycares.org charitable event. The Philly draft, I know I saw today, raised $2,010 just from raffling off prizes alone. So that was awesome. But what makes Scott Fishbowl even more unique is the scoring. And the commissioner of that league, of all 250, 300 divisions, Scott Fish at ScottFish24 on Twitter, he sets the scoring every year, and it's always different. This year in particular, PPR draft, always going to be PPR, 1 point per first down as well for running backs and wide receivers. But then for tight ends, you get an extra point for the catch, extra point for a first down for tight ends. There's no negative points for quarterbacks. So even if they throw 5 picks, they're off the hook. And then 0.25 points per carry, all positions, not just running backs. That's why I drafted Lamar Jackson 7th overall, because I know he likes to run. So
with that's that a great pick, Lamar. And with the way those rules are, I mean, your running quarterbacks are, elite of the elite. And I know Jalen Hurts went number 1 overall in your league. I don't know if you saw any of the other Philadelphia divisions. how many other divisions took Jalen Hurts number one? And was there any trader that, knowing Philly fans, maybe you guys ran him out with torches and pitchforks if he passed on Jalen Hurts number one?
No, it was determined pretty much a week out, maybe even more, that Jalen Hurts was going 4 for 4 across the board, 101 overall in all 4 Philly divisions. And he did. In fact, some of the managers that had the first overall pick in their divisions before the draft even started, about a half hour before, already put the sticker up on the board. They made quite the statement, and everyone was on notice that, yeah, none of us are getting Jalen Hurts. So it is what it is. I didn't think I was getting him at 7 anyway. But yeah, those rushing quarterbacks, 0.25 points per carry. And that is just one of the rules that makes Scott Fishbowl so great this year. So let's talk about rules and rule changes for leagues this year for commissioners across the world. 8-team, 10-team, 12-team, dynasty leagues even. What is one of the rule changes out there for you that you think is the most important, for commissioners to install, or that really lays the groundwork for their leagues out there?
I was in my punishment league this year. In fact, this past year, we implemented no defense in the league. And that I was, as a purist, fantasy football purist, against it first, just thinking like, oh, come on, like, it's part of the game, like, you may lose a game because of a defense, but a quarterback might lose a game because his defense plays poorly. It's part of the game. But honestly, I think it was the best thing that we did for that league in terms of rule changes. You're not wasting waiver claims or a waiver spot or fab dollars on a defense. Then you're not getting beaten just because the opposing defense put up, 17 points because they had a pick six, or you're not getting beaten because you got -7 points from your defense. If that's too extreme of a rule for you, I would recommend at minimum doing a no negative defense, where you build the rules where you're not losing points from your defense. So at worst, your defense gets you 0 points. But if that's something, you got a league that's a little open-minded to doing things a new way, that's a rule that, like I said, as a traditionalist, I was against at first. But once we were a few weeks into the season, I was like, okay, you know what? This was a great rule change that we made. This made the league significantly better.
Yeah, it feels like defenses are almost like a wild card in some leagues. Even the worst manager in your league, and we all know who that is in our leagues, can grab a defense for the week that puts up 20 points, and you can take the loss just because of that. So if you don't want to leave, listen, fantasy football there's so much luck baked into it at a baseline. You can draft a stellar team and then go to the finals, and then have Justin Jefferson last year. What did he have? 2 catches for like 30 yards in the final, something like that. Yeah. You can get all the way, and just the luck just isn't there. But week to week, if you want to remove some of the luck factors, I would say getting rid of a defense does that. But then I'm probably offending a lot of people out there that play in IDP leagues, individual defensive player leagues, where you draft actual players on defenses, whether that be a linebacker, safety, cornerback. There's tons of content out there that cover that, as well as on fantraxhq.com. So if that's something you want to do, feel free to check that out. I would say for me, if you're starting a league, or if you're still in a league, deciding whether you want to do standard PPR or half PPR is like the absolute end all be all first thing you got to talk about. I'm in a league that's been running since I was in college, and I've been out of college for almost 10 years now. We've never done a PPR league. It's always been standard. And every year, without fail, it comes up. Can we please revote on that? And we just did our annual PPR vote the other day in our group me. There's about some of the leagues, or some of the teams are co-managed, and we have about 15 to 20 guys voting on it. And it was a dead even split again. And we side with what we've always done. So again, it's going to be a standard league, but hopefully we can come around to doing half PPR, because I typically play in PPR. So I have to change my strategy around for that league. Talking about some other rule changes here, though. Tight end premium. I talked about the Scott Fishbowl. That's like super tight end premium. Extra point for a catch, extra point for a first down. Do you find that tight end premium is becoming like the new norm in fantasy football?
Slowly, yes. And I think it'd be something I'd be in favor of, because some people will then go the extreme of what I suggest with no defense and say, yeah, no kickers, and you know what, no tight ends either. And I believe you talked about it in the tight end episode when I was out of town on vacation, where tight ends are a part of football. Like, yeah, it's not an elite position scoring wise, but it's still part of the game. And honestly, I think tight end premium would be a lot more popular if it not for Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is single-handedly ruining the tight end premium rule and keeping a lot of leagues from doing that because he puts up wide receiver one quality numbers year in and year out. He's not just a very good tight end. He's an elite fantasy football player. And if you put a tight end premium stack on top of him, Travis Kelce is arguably the number one overall pick in your league then. So I think it's slowly becoming the norm. We'll see if the tight end position, this was a really good tight end draft class in real football this year. If that starts, living up to the expectations that they have, maybe it stops becoming the norm, but it kind of feels like they're just trying to inflate the position because it's weak. But Travis Kelce being the outlier in it, I think is kind of holding some leagues back because then at that point, Travis Kelce is just a cheat code if you have him on your team, it feels like.
Yeah, I talked about that on the tight end episode here on the fly, where we talked about the Fantrax consensus rankings at tight end. And Travis Kelce was number one across the board at the position. I don't think anyone's going to argue that in most cases, most leagues. If you plug his numbers over the past couple of years into wide receiver, even, he's finished as a top 12 wide receiver each of the past 5 years since Mahomes been the starter in Kansas City, as high as wide receiver 3, which is just absolutely bonkers. If you were to raise your scoring to tight end premium and give him that extra point per reception, I mean, you're right. He's a cheat code, and he probably should be the the number one overall pick in those sort of leagues. I know, again, to bring it up, Scott Fishbowl, with that ultra premium tight end position, he is the number one pick in a lot of leagues across that format. So while it does inflate Travis Kelce quite a bit, everyone has a chance at him for the most part, depending on how you pick your draft order. That much more of a reason to get a top tight end in those sort of leagues, but it makes those streamers, those Hayden Hursts, those Mike Gesicki's a little bit more valuable week to week to pick up and play, especially when Travis Kelce has a bye week or Mark Andrews has a bye week, something like that. The other rule that I've seen floating around, a lot of changes, and a lot of leagues already have this implemented, so it's something to think about for new commissioners especially, is quarterbacks and how many points they get for a passing touchdown. Typically, and when I started playing fantasy football and in most of my leagues, it's 4 points for a passing touchdown. But I feel the league has really transitioned into a more pass-heavy approach, most teams. So some leagues have now implemented 6 points for a passing touchdown. Where do you stand on that? What are you most comfortable with playing?
I prefer the 4 just because it balances the playing field a little bit, similar to the tight end premium, how tight ends get extra points. Because quarterbacks, a quarterback can go out and throw 3 touchdowns on multiple times in a season. How often do you see a wide receiver or a running back catch or rush for 3 touchdowns over the course of the season? So I prefer 4, but if a league is doing 6, I'm not wholly against it. I'm in one league where it does it weird. It's 5 points for a touchdown, not 4, not 6, and it's -1 for turnovers. So you still get the net results, similar effects, but a bit lesser. It's not quite as big an impact as 6, but if you throw an interception, it's only -1. So it's not the end of the world then, but I'm okay with either one. That's not one I'm really a big stickler on that I'm going to be, it's not a hill I'm going to die on if I'm, making a case for a rule in a league, whether it's 4 points or 6 points. The only exception is Superflex and 2 QB leagues. In that instance, then I feel like you got to go 4 points for a touchdown pass, because 6 points for a touchdown pass and in a Superflex or a 2 QB league, any league that allows you to play a second quarterback, I think it's just unfair at that point.
Yeah, if you start your draft with Patrick Mahomes and then on the way back you get, I don't know, name Kirk Cousins. Even you could get a guy like Kirk Cousins, third most pass heaviest team last year, the Minnesota Vikings were. You're in the money right there with your first 2 picks, and then I imagine you take Patrick Mahomes first overall, you get Kirk Cousins second round, then you've got the next pick. Your team is set. So really, really valuable to have the first overall pick. So I do like the 4 points there, and that brings up a good point. Superflex or not Superflex, 1 quarterback league, that is a whole other conversation. I know in my home league specifically, we do 1 quarterback, and it's just a 10-team league. We keep it tight. It's a very close knit group of guys, and when it's only 10 quarterbacks and there's 32 starting quarterbacks, they're not that valuable. You're bound to get a good starting quarterback unless you have someone drafting 2 of them. And in this case, it's an auction league, a salary cap league, where we all have $200 and we're bidding on these players. They become even less valuable. I mean, last year I got Tom Brady for $1. That's ridiculous. But everyone else had a starting quarterback at that point, so no one's going to upbid me on that. So, with the transition into a pass heavier approach in the NFL, I do think there's a lot of pass heavy teams. A lot of quarterbacks are running, but also throwing as well. I do think there's a surplus of good quarterbacks in the NFL, and I do think Superflex is the way to go to setting up lineups. It's hard to get that change when you've been doing something for so long, but if you want to root for more players, why not do a Superflex league? Because quarterbacks are really just the focal point of any offense nowadays.
Especially if you're in a smaller league where, your second quarterback isn't some, bum off the street that's getting the start just because of an injury or something like that.
Right.
If you're in a league that's got like 8 teams in it or something like that, have the regular flex and throw the super flex in there as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the times, if a player on our team doesn't do well, we turn to the quarterback and say it's his fault. He didn't get him the ball. He didn't look for him in the passing game. We put so much emphasis on the quarterback, but why aren't we playing in Superflex leagues then? If we're emphasizing the quarterback so much because it's so important, then we should be starting 2 in our leagues. Just an idea there, but I get it. If you want to put some of those top guys on a pedestal, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, even, one quarterback is the way to go. If you want one of those guys, you got to go up and get them with a premium pick. Bonus points, 100 yards or more rushing, 100 yards or more receiving. Maybe you hit the 10 target mark, you get points for that. Is that something you've implemented in leagues, something you're a fan of?
I've done it in other leagues, none where I'm commissioner of, and implemented them. I'm not a fan because, if someone crosses the 100-yard mark, they're already doing pretty good. Why do they need to do better just because they got 100 versus 99? Or same for, rushing plays that are greater than 40 or 50 or 60 yards. It feels like overkill at that point when you start adding all those rules, and it makes the math complicated. A 60-yard touchdown run is 12 points. That's easy. Well, wait, now there's the extra, was it 2 points for a 60-yard run or 3 points for a 60? I think it was 3 for 60, 2 for 50, 1 for 40. I think you're overcomplicating it at that point when you start adding in all those extra ones. So I don't know about you. It's one of those, like, I'm not a fan of it. Again, I'm not going to walk away from a league because of it, but it's one of those, like, come on, let's stop overcomplicating things.
Yeah, it feels like you're kicking the loser while they're down. Justin Jefferson's
Assuming
already.
You're the loser. You love it if you got your guy and he goes
exactly.
from 99 to 100 yards and gets you an extra point or 2.
I do like the idea, though, maybe though, for quarterbacks, on the topic of them, hitting the 400-yard pass mark. That's something that's you don't see every week from a lot of guys. So maybe that's something that you get an extra 2 points for. Just to give them, again, if you're playing in a 1 quarterback league, if you want to boost the value, maybe add some bonuses to your quarterbacks. That's a way to go. Here's one I saw on social media, and this one was very, very interesting to me. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm including myself in this. I've been playing fantasy football since 2007. How many times we complain about how we lost certain weeks, how we lost certain championships. Well, if this happened, I wouldn't have lost the game. Well, if this guy didn't get hurt in the first, minute, I wouldn't have lost. How many times have we seen a player go off the line of scrimmage, a wide receiver in particular, or a guy take his first carry and grab his calf, and then he's out of the game and you're screwed? So I saw this thing online, mulligan. We all know what a mulligan is, but it's something you can apply to your team one time per season in which you feel that you got screwed over by a player going down very, very early in a game. Now, again, is this a first quarter exception, or is this a first half exception? Is this a first play exception? Things you got to tweak. But with this mulligan, you can use it one time per season, and you can replace any injured player that goes down early in a game with a bench designation one time during the season. So before your game, you tell the other manager, hey, T. Higgins is super questionable. And this is something that happened last year. I'm starting him, but I'm using my mulligan. If he goes down, I've got Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the bench. If T. Higgins goes down in the first quarter, whatever your league decides, I want to invoke my mulligan, and I want Marquez Valdez-Scantling's points that week. Could be 3 points, could be a week that Marquez Valdez-Scantling goes off. Is this something that you feel would help the whining in leagues, for lack of a better term? Or is this something that maybe someone that whines too often has sat in their room alone and come up with to make themselves feel better?
Yeah, I think this is something that could certainly help to avoid that whining. I just think you got to be really, really clear about the rules in
Yeah.
advance of how the mulligan works. It's got to be rock solid. The injury has to happen in the first quarter, and he does not play a snap the rest of the game. If he plays a snap trying to make it work in the second half and then sits out, sorry, too bad. He tried to make it work in the second half. He played a snap in the second half. And I think the biggest thing you got to do as well is designate a player each week of this is who I'm putting in if something were to happen. Because I know last year, and I think a big reason the mulligan's becoming popular is, and someone involving T. Higgins, but the Bengals Bills game getting shut down and never being resumed. And a lot of commissioners and leagues were having their heads spinning with a late season game of how do we rectify this? Do we just
championship weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, it was
and
ridiculous.
So do you take the average of what that player should have done? There was a hot debate in one of my leagues where one guy wanted to put in the person on his bench who just went off for like 20 something points. And it's like, okay, but you're saying that with hindsight being 2020, like would he have actually been your selection that week? Right. So that's, where things are just up in the air. So you got to figure out a way in advance of, so that way you don't have that hindsight. Because it's really easy to sit back and, pass on your mulligan for later in the year if T. Higgins does go down, to use him as an example again, doesn't play the rest of the game. And the rest of your bench was okay. It's probably not winning you your week anyway. And be like, I'll save it for later in the year. So it's got to be something that's just rock solid in advance of this is who I'm putting in if this player goes down at a certain point. So it's mulligan's one of those experimental rules that's new and shiny and it sounds great, but it's one of those that there's still going to be problems of, oh, well, you wouldn't have put that guy in if you didn't know he was going to go off for 3 touchdowns. Okay, well, nobody's going to know that. Nobody's going to honestly admit, yeah, no, I wouldn't put him in. He wasn't going to be my pick. So there's some kinks to work out with it, but I'm all for this rule. If you and your league can figure out some rock solid conditions around it, do it. Absolutely. Otherwise, maybe shelve it and, think on it for another season as to how you do it. Experimental rules, though, I saw a video and I forget who it was, so I can't credit them, where they were breaking down other unique rules that I felt were experimental and can kind of avoid the complaining that you get sometimes. One of them was trades. And it's always a hot topic in every single league where if you put it to a league vote, no trades get accepted because every single trade that's ever been done in fantasy football is biased. Yep, the whole league will veto it. And then if you give the commissioner dictatorial powers and they're the ones that put it through, everyone's going to complain anyway. Oh, that was a one-sided trade. Why'd you put that through? Blah, blah, blah. I saw a rule in this video that I think maybe could eliminate that. And it's a 24-hour open trade offer window after the trade's accepted.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if a trade's accepted, you've got 24 hours where everyone else in the league can make better offers to both teams. And if nobody makes a better offer, then the trade goes through. And I think that's the perfect solution because people will sit there and go like, oh, this is an unfair trade, blah, blah, blah. I offered you a better deal, or I would have given you this. Okay, put up or shut up time. And then when a lot of people don't want to make that same trade that they were talking up a storm in the group chat about.
What's left to say? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that could be a really interesting way to kind of negate that because it puts everyone's money where their mouth is. Oh, that's an unfair trade. So send a better one. If you don't send a better one, the trade's going through. And another one from this same video that we saw that I thought was interesting was a week 3 waiver draft, basically, where after the 3rd week of the season, instead of doing waivers the first 3 weeks, you do a draft, a 1-round draft, worst place to first of all the players that are out there in free agents, and then it goes to waivers after that. And I thought that was really interesting because I think it helps the teams that have a slow start out of the gates in the beginning of the season where, you start 1 and 2, you got a running back that's hurt. Now you got the top pick of all the free agents that are available. And now a guy that's had a good start to the season, you can go get him right away. You don't have to burn fab dollars on him or go get. Have to get him week 1, and then the guy that you sacrificed to the waiver wire in week 1 turns out he was actually a good pick, and you just gave up on him too early. So I thought that was another interesting one that I saw as well, that maybe leagues will workshop with some unique rules for potentially this year for your league.
Yeah, I can't. I really, really like the trade one, because I can't tell you the absolute anxiety I get during football season when I see whatever format or whatever platform I'm playing on. I see the icon notification on my phone. I go, what just happened? What just went down in the league that I am not a part of? And
especially when the notification cuts off because there are too many players involved, and you're like, oh, Jonathan Taylor, and and it's like, wait, what did he give up for Jonathan Taylor?
I'm trying to have dinner, please, guys. Why was I not involved in this? Yeah. But yeah, I think an interesting thing to do, and listen, who you're playing with, friends, family, coworkers, whatever, depending on how serious you take it. Maybe have a contract, maybe have guys sign something beforehand that say, listen, let's all agree on the rules. You sign this, and there's no complaining throughout the year because you signed this. I know it sounds silly, but some people really, really get their feelings hurt throughout the year when things don't go their way. Everyone wants to win. I get it. I'm smiling because I know I've had my moments in the past. I try to be better every year, but I get very, very invested. But yeah, I really like the trade thing, because it's like, well, I hate the trade that just went through, but now I know that these guys are available. Let me see what I can come up with. I really, really like that a lot.
And if you can't make a better offer, then you can't complain about the trade.
And hey, maybe the manager doesn't want to accept another offer, but there's at least a 24-hour window period for them to listen.
You got to consider that as well as the manager, because the guy on the other side's getting offers.
That's true. Which players are available?
Yeah, so you may think, no, we're going to sit still, and he's going to stick to it. And then all of a sudden, that offer that you agreed to is gone, and you passed up on what could have been a good offer, or it could spark a new negotiation with a different owner. Then, so
the tough part about that one, though, is that I know there's been some trades that have gone down an hour before Thursday Night Football.
Yes, and you'll have to make like a commissioner exempt. You'll have to know that in advance of, okay, Thursday Night Football's coming up. Like, we got to get this deal done by 8 o'clock Eastern time on a Thursday, so that way we got 24 hours for it to go through potentially. That's just something you're going to have to know in advance at that point. Then I don't think you're going to make exceptions for the rules to force it through quickly, because then that'll bring back all the complaining that everybody was trying to get rid of.
And it defeats the purpose. Exactly.
Yep.
One thing for the mulligan thing, if it's something that you listen to tonight here on the fly and you're like, hey, I want to implement that into my league, you got to have, I think, a cutoff, because if you're in week 14 and the playoffs start next week and you're battling for a spot and you're like, I saved my mulligan for this moment. Well, maybe your league allows that. So that's something you got to decide. But if not, maybe do hey, we all have a mulligan, but up until week 7, something like that. Or things can get a little dicey there. This, as you can see, people here with the title is Commissioner Think Tank Part 1 here on the fly. We are going to do a Part 2 next week. I will not be here. My family is taking a vacation, so I will be out of town, but Sean will be here, joined by another guest. So come back next week for Think Tank Part 2 here on the fly, and we'll be talking more rule changes.
Yeah, going to be joined by Josh Beese, who does the Commissioner's Corner for Fantrax. So going to bring him in, dive, I think, more on the managerial side of things compared to, we're talking mostly from, the people in the league's perspective. So I plan to ask him things about like best way to get people to pay up the money that they have to pay to get into the league, managerial. What did you do when Taysom Hill became QB eligible if you were doing a league that had him QB eligible back when he was named the starter a few years ago? So some fun stuff like that. It'll be a different, but for you commissioners out there, and I think it'll be another healthy podcast for you to definitely watch.
Yeah. And for those of you listening here on Fantrax, Fantrax is probably the most commissioner-friendly platform out there. As far as getting your league mates to pay up, go check out Fantrax. There is, and I won't give it away because I want you to check it out for yourself, but next week on the Commissioner Think Tank Part 2, there is a feature on Fantrax that guarantees that everyone will pay up before the year starts. Let's move on here to the rewards, because we all love to win and we all love to get cash, whatever your prize may be, what have you. So let's talk about the best rewards for a winner whether it is that big payout or maybe something else. Maybe your team has or your league has some sort of commemorative memorabilia to pass around. So first, let's talk about the payouts, because I've been in leagues where the payout is set before 70%, 30% split. Third place gets some points. Maybe the winner of the loser bowl gets some points. I've also been in leagues where I've been in the finals and I text the commissioner of the guy I'm playing and go, listen, I don't feel good about my team. I'm willing to do a 50-50 split and we'll just take bragging rights. We're both getting paid, but we'll take the bragging rights. And sure, sounds good.
I've never been in a league that does that. Is that a big money league when you're doing that? I imagine it's not $100 that you're fighting over at that point.
It's not it's $100 buy-in for 12 teams. So
yeah,
it's a significant pot for sure. But we usually do the 70-30 split. But I've had guys negotiate back and go, listen, I won't do 50-50, but 60-40, 65-35. It's like, okay, sounds good. Do you do the big thing I want to talk about, though, is weekly payouts. Is that something that you're interested in where, hey, the 7th place team or the 8th place team in a 12-team league is so far behind making the playoffs, but hey, they won week 13. They have the most points of the whole league, even though they're not going to make the playoffs. They're getting some cash. Is that something that you find a lot of leagues you play in do?
Not a lot, but one of the leagues that I'm in did that last year. And I thought it was great because it keeps you invested throughout the season. Even if you got a poor team, you got a guy that is coming back in injury later, it keeps you setting your lineup, which is ideal because there's almost no worse feeling in the world than you're going into the final week of the regular season. You're playing a good team. You need to win and a little help to get in. And that help is the team that hasn't set their lineup since week 2. Half their starters are on the IR or playing the other guy you're neck and neck with in the standings. So I think that in any rules that you have, whether it's throwing a punishment in there, I think those are all great ways to keep people engaged throughout the season and avoid those situations where people are just going to, after week 5 or 6, if they start, 1-5, 1-4 on the season, throw in the towel and say, forget it, I'm done playing. I'm not checking my team anymore.
It also keeps them active on the waiver wire. I've seen a lot of playoff teams get angry when bottom feeders are, picking up good players on the waiver wire. Like, you're not even in competition anymore.
Yeah.
Hey, if you have a weekly payout,
you are
some incentive there. Absolutely. So definitely something I'm intrigued by, but oftentimes that means raising the pot because the winner at the end of the day wants all the money. So you might have to raise the pot a little bit.
And if you don't want to raise the pot and still keep people invested, the loser, whoever has the lowest amount of points that week, has to pay the highest amount of points to whoever had the most. So you want to double down on it, then it's the loser that has to pay extra every single week. So that'll really motivate people to check their lineups. Otherwise, they're going to get a lot of Venmo requests throughout the season.
Yeah, exactly. So what's your thoughts on trophies? I know a lot of my leagues have trophies. We put the plaque on. The bragging rights, you get to display it in your house, etc. Do you have any trophies in your leagues that you're proud of that you've had it maybe are hoping to have this year?
My family league has what I consider maybe the best trophy in fantasy football. It is the major award. And yes, the major award, the leg lamp from A Christmas Story. My father and I, we bought one of those offline, a smaller one. It's not a full-size one, but it fully lights up. We built a wooden pedestal, screwed it in, and I went to a trophy store and got just the front little metal plate made to put on the front of it. So floating throughout all my family league amongst uncles, cousins, I've had it for a brief period, is the major award.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And everyone loves it except for, the moms and the aunts and the wives and girlfriends who then it gets displayed in the front of their house, much like in the show, usually for a day or two. And thankfully, nobody has accidentally knocked it over and just so happened to use up all the glue earlier in that evening. But no, it's a fun one because it's a ridiculous looking award. We've got other leagues that have, trophies, and those are fun too, but especially having made that with my dad and it being a funny, ridiculous award, and the family all knows what it is, that makes it a little bit more special for me too. What about you? Do you have any unique ones that stand out to you in your leagues?
My home league is always going to be near and dear to my heart, and two guys from the home league I don't know what spurred it, but randomly, I think it was like year 4. They built, and I know it wasn't year 1 because the guy that won year 1, he just got it back for the first time this past year. He never had it. Even though he won year 1, the trophy wasn't in existence, and he just won year 16. So he finally has it in his possession. It was a long drought. But they just took planks of wood, and it's this hollow wooden box. It's big, and it's got one of my buddies' like old, I don't know, lacrosse trophy. It's so patched together. And the handles, one of them's a doorknob and one of them's a bottle opener, but you can hoist it up. It's got all of our names on it, and we're hoping to make it kind of like the Stanley Cup. You don't have every player on it, but it'll hopefully expand as the years go by. Heading into year 17, shout out to the Outside the Bun Fantasy Football League. But Alvin Kamara scored 6 touchdowns one season, 2020, I believe. The winner.
I lost a fantasy championship to Kamara that year.
Absolutely electric performance on Christmas Day. When he scored his 6th, he held up the 6, and the manager who had him printed that out and slapped it on the trophy. So you can really do whatever you want with it when it's yours. So definitely of the trophy. But I've seen rings, and I love the idea of rings because they're absolutely obnoxious. And the more you get, the more obnoxious it gets. And hey,
and you get
when
to
you
wear
win
them every year.
Yeah, you get them to flash around. But one of the coolest things that I've seen out there, when researching this, is people with jackets. And it's probably Masters inspired or golf inspired. But when you win, you put on the gold jacket or green jacket or whatever color, you get to customize it. And that's something really cool that if you're thinking of an idea and there's some special jacket that, maybe fits everyone or doesn't fit everyone quite right, but they'd be happy to have it. That's a cool idea out there.
That's what I was going to throw in at the end there. Make sure you get either something that's elastic or has a little give to it, or hopefully
maybe a robe. Where, I don't know.
Yeah, everybody's about the same size. That way you don't, make it like the sisterhood of the traveling pants fantasy football.
There you go.
Basically, something that it's going to fit everybody. So someone that wins the league doesn't hulk out of it one year and then
no fat guy in a little coat.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want to have that situation happening.
I did on Twitter earlier today at Colin_MCT ask people for any sort of winning, losing, anything that could pertain to this episode here on the fly. And at Drew Delaware on Twitter, he was actually at the Philly Scott Fish live draft. He wrote in that his league actually chips in for a 13th team in his 12-team league. And those dues don't go to any winner. They take those dues from the fictitious 13 team, and the winner gets to decide where they donate those dues to charity. I thought that was really cool. And I actually went back and forth with him. I've also seen people, when you win your league, let's say Alvin Kamara, helps win your league. Very quickly, you go online and you see, hey, does Alvin Kamara have a charity? And if he does, take a proceed or a portion of your proceeds and send them to that charity. Really cool. At the end of the day, as long as you're getting your money back and you're having fun, that's all that really matters. But hey, some people do play and hope to win a lot of money, so that's cool. But it's always good karma. The fantasy gods are always watching and listening to maybe donate some of the proceeds to charity. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I want to get your thoughts on this before we head into our best loser punishment draft, which I'm really looking forward to, is the idea of a World Cup. And if you're a soccer fan, this will make a lot of sense to you. It's really, really cool. I saw it online. Every 4 seasons, so obviously every World Cup, the Women's Soccer World Cup is actually coming up in a couple of days here. Every 4 seasons, your league does something special, whether it raises the pot big time and everyone knows, hey, it's year 4. We're coming back again. Let's raise that pot up. So the winner of that World Cup season gets a bigger pot, or maybe, there's a trophy. There's a World Cup trophy. Like, oh yeah, well, Colin won the World Cup here. He's got the World Cup trophy. Doing something special every 4 years to maybe make it a little bit more exciting, keep your league engaged. Is that something you might try to implement into your league? Is that something that interests you a little bit?
I actually, in my Dynasty League, want to bring this up. I'm in, and Fantrax makes it easy to manage, where they can keep track of dollar amounts players have, and you can set a salary cap. But I'm in a Dynasty League for basketball, baseball, and football with a bunch of my college buddies. And I would love for there to be a World Cup every 4 years and what I would throw in with it as well, you throw the dynasty out for that year. You do a redraft
Oh, okay.
instead of your dynasty. If you got contracts, you hold them over an extra year, and you'll have to make this clear, a couple of years in advance. Hey, starting in 2026, we're putting the dynasty on pause. We're doing a World Cup that year, and then you up it, and then you do a redraft as well. So yeah, you may have be on the down end of a team that you've built that isn't too good, but hey, the World Cup is coming up next year. So you know what? I'll stick through in this league, deal with the rebuild this year, come back next year with a whole new team with a redraft, and then really focus on the year after that. So I think especially in dynasty leagues, that could be something really fun to implement because it totally flips the style of the league on its head too. It's the same guys that you're playing with, but now it's it's a one-off, and that's what the World Cup is. You're throwing out
Right.
all the soccer teams that exist. It's not, the English Premier League teams and the MLS teams. It's all the best of the best coming together, representing what is basically a new team with that World Cup team that's only going to exist for a short period of time until the next 4 years when it rolls around again and some of the same players are still back. So I think in dynasty leagues, that's something that really could be a lot of fun to bring up. Put the dynasty on pause for a year, do the World Cup, up the bidding, have a specific trophy for the World Cup, and then resume the dynasty the next year after that for another 3 years.
Yeah, that makes it really interesting. You could still have your rookie draft, but maybe
it's double the pool size now. You got double the rookies in there. If you're doing it this year, Bijan Robinson and Marvin Harrison Jr. are both in the rookie draft next year.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I was saying you could still have the draft. No, I kind of like that. That makes it really interesting.
I like that because then how do you figure out the draft order for the following year? Unless you do the World Cup draft, but at that point it's, the team that has the best team in fantasy could just tank the World Cup draft to get the number one pick or something if they have a slow start. So
but then
I would just kind of lump everyone together into one.
You have to consider older players too. Like, hey, I'm not going to be able to use Tyler Lockett in this next season.
They might fall off in 2 years. Maybe I don't give them that contract extension. Those are things you got to consider.
Maybe I trade him now to a team that thinks they can use him this year. Something to think about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sean. Let's get down to business here. We're going to move into the punishment draft, and this was your idea, so I'm going to let you take this away. I've come up with a couple on my own. I hope I can get the draft juices flowing here. But go ahead and tell people what we're about to do here on the fly.
Yeah, I figure so much of our conversations are conversations where, I ask you a question and you answer, you ask me a question, we go back and forth on something, but, we've only been a few episodes in so far, but we've never done a draft, even though we're a fantasy football podcast. So I figured, okay, let's do a draft and let's draft punishments head to head against each other and see who can compile a list of 5 better punishments against one or the other. So I was actually going to give you the first pick since, it was my idea, so I had a little more time to think about it. So if you want the first pick, go ahead. I figure we're not going to snake it. We'll just go, one after the other the whole time. So if you want the first pick, go ahead. But if not, I'm ready to go.
I'll take the first pick. And okay. I think this is one of the most hilarious punishments you can do. But there's a caveat to it. So maybe it's not a good first pick, but it is the funniest thing I've ever heard. So if you have a 10-team league, but there's 11 members, and here's what you do. The 10 people play in the league, and there's one person that's not playing in the league, but they're going to be in next year. So the loser is going to get bounced for that 11th person. Pretty much a banishment for one season. So all your friends are going to be talking about it, and you're just going to have to sit in the corner and listen to them talk about how great the draft was and who's winning, and you're just gonna have to wait a year. But the funniest thing I've read was in Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life book, and this is where I got it, was that the winner of that league actually gets to choose who's bounced of the losing teams. So if you don't make the playoffs, you could be in jeopardy of getting kicked out. And the story comes from Mad Men actor John Hamm was shooting Mad Men all day, running late, texting his guys, yo, guys, I'm running late. I'll be at the draft soon. He finally shows up, whatever was a half hour later. So walks in, he's like, oh God, and sits down, gets all of his stuff out, ready to draft. And they're all just staring at him. And he goes, what? And they go, dude, you're out. You're not in this draft. He chugs a beer, gives him a hand gesture that I won't do here on live, and just slowly walks out the door. So My first overall pick is that you do 11 teams in a 10-team league, 13 to 12, and the loser in whichever way is banished from the league.
Delegation. I like it.
Yes.
I've thought about that briefly because in my family league, I have a very big family. And so
Family. Oh man, that's harsh.
Well, hear me out on this. I've considered in the back of my mind, because my generation right now is the youngest generation. Until a couple months ago, my cousin Matt, who is in the league, and I'm very close with my cousin Matt. Shout out to him. Became a father, the first of my generation in my family to become a father. So congratulations to Matt and Michelle and little baby Bennett Thomas a couple months ago. But I've thought in the back of my mind, okay, if this league's going like 20 years down the road, how are we going to fit our kids into these leagues? So I've thought, okay, if you got a big enough group, a big office or something like that everybody wants to get into fantasy, but a 20-team league is ridiculous, have 2 leagues and do delegation. And, all the, losers from the first year get sent into a lesser league where there's a smaller buy-in, smaller payout. And then you can do, the top 4 move into the upper league the next year and the bottom 4 move out. So I like delegation as a punishment where you're not even in the league the next year, though.
Yeah.
And then maybe you're, waiting in the wings to get back in, or maybe you're just like, it's Survivor. You're out for good, and someone totally new comes in the next year to replace you. And, you look around after 6 years and it's, 6 new people and you're like, oh man, how am I still here at this point?
Yeah, I like it. Mm-hmm. All right. So what's your first pick? What do you got here?
I'm going to go with a classic for my first pick. I'm going to go with the Waffle House Challenge. That's always, you mentioned a funny one. That's always a funny one where whomever loses their league has to spend 24 hours in a Waffle House. And for every waffle you consume, you take away an hour. And people go into that thinking, that's not too bad. I can easily eat, a bunch of waffles and be out of there in no time. And then you consume about 4 waffles. And if you've had any sort of breakfast carb like pancakes, waffles, French toast, those make you feel full for a long time as well.
Oh, yeah.
And even if you think about it, you sit there and you consume 8 waffles or something like that, you still got to sit in a Waffle House for 16 hours. And a couple stipulations with that rule as well. You have to finish the waffle before you order another one. You can't eat half a waffle. It goes cold and soggy, and then you push it to the side and get a fresh one. No. That waffle's on the table. It's got to be eaten before you get to the next one. As cold or as soggy and wet as it is, that's your punishment. You got to serve it. Nobody can come in and help you. You can't pass a waffle off to somebody else and have them eat it for you. And the last stipulation I'll throw in as well, because you're being punished, you don't pay the tab. Everyone else, have the league join you in the beginning. Everyone gets a bite to eat. You all hang out together and laugh at the loser one time. And then you just leave him alone for the rest of the day to consume his waffles in shame. Live stream it on Facebook or something like that so everybody knows he didn't cheat. Then pick up the tab and leave some nice tips in advance for the wait staff. And make them aware as well so they're not like, dude, you've been here 5 hours. You got to go.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do this online, and the threads, especially on Twitter, are just always so good of people updating how far along they are. And they go in so
confident too of like, I'll be here for 4 hours, if that. They can eat 20 waffles.
No. I don't know if anyone, people that might not have been to Waffle House listening to this. I love Waffle House. Mm-hmm. I love their waffles. Can't imagine doing this challenge. Those waffles are large. They are. I mean, they're the size of my head.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So you're up for the next pick. Then what do you got on your mind?
Yeah, this is one that a lot of my leagues implement, and they're awesome. And it is draft day attire. The winner picks what the loser has to wear to the draft the following season. My one league, it is this lion costume, consistently, never been washed, that you have to get into. And we're playing cornhole, we're playing beer pong in it. I mean, you're wearing this lion suit that someone for the last X amount of years has worn before you, and you have to wear it pretty much until that draft is over or so. And then you get to shed the lion suit because it is a new year. Another one I've done, I made the loser of the league the year I won in my home league dress up like a prisoner, like Shawshank Redemption. And, we have to go up and put the sticker on the board of the player you're drafting. Before the draft, I set up
cuffs in his ankles.
No, I said
Okay.
better. I set up a
Okay.
cinder block, and I had a rope tied to the cinder block around his ankle, and he could just get far enough to put the sticker of the player on the board. So that was definitely one of my favorites that I did. But yeah, choosing the attire for the loser, and they have to go along with it. That's the best part. Make them do whatever you want. That is my second pick here in the punishment draft.
So you mentioned Matthew Berry before. For my next pick, I'll go with one that we didn't do in my league, but somebody did locally in the town that I'm based out of. And Matthew Berry loved it so much, he actually gave them a shout out a couple of years ago. Awesome. They submit the loser into the local town parade that summer. And they had a float that they were pulling him on with like a unicorn rocking horse, and he had like a princess outfit or something ridiculous like that on, and a banner that said, I'm terrible at fantasy football, laugh at me. And he had to, go, one of the other league mates or whatever, in their truck were hauling this trailer, and he had to go through the parade with everyone in the town seeing him and laughing at him at his expense for losing. So that I thought was like, okay, we can't steal this in it because someone's already done it, especially locally now. I'm all for stealing ideas, but it'd be kind of lame if in the next like 2 years later, we steal their idea in the same town in the same parade. But I thought that was absolutely hilarious when I heard about it, especially, like if you do your draft public and got to wear a ridiculous outfit, that's funny. But now to be literally paraded through town for your shame, I thought was hilarious.
I actually kind of like the idea of, if it's broadcasted, having a separate parade in the town whenever of, hey, have you had a fantasy football league that took place in this town this past year? Anyone that wants to partake, it's just a parade of losers specifically to fantasy football.
Get other leagues in on it.
And, you maybe have 10 people that join in, but 10 losers parading around from all these different leagues would be a pretty cool way to bring the community together.
That could be a fun event. You're in Philadelphia. I'm an hour south of St. Louis. But
I don't know if I do it in Philly. That might get a little. You're gonna
get pelted with snowballs and ice balls. That's it. Everyone dresses up as Santa Claus.
There you go.
On a parade.
That reminds me to pause the draft real quick. The fantasy football leagues are usually take place over the holidays, especially the playoffs. I was doing some research on bye weeks, et cetera, et cetera. I realized that this year, week 17, which most championships take place on, is on New Year's Eve day, which is a Sunday. And there is no Monday night football game that week. Last year, the Bills-Bengals game that obviously caused, Damar Hamlin obviously took a hit, and the game was postponed indefinitely, canceled actually. That took place on Monday night. Most years, the managers are waiting for that last game on Monday night to see who's going to win. This year, no Monday night game.
Comes down to Sunday night.
Sunday night football, Packers, Vikings should be a good one. There are games on Saturday, and there's one game on Thursday that week. So New Year's Eve, you could be finishing up 2023 as a fantasy football championship or a champion. So pretty cool. Let's move right along here. My third pick. This is a classic, and I think I'd be okay if I had enough time to prepare for this. But I like the karaoke idea. I like going to a bar that has karaoke or anywhere, and it's packed. I want it to be crowded if we're going to do this. But one song, winner's choice, head on up, and you got to sing the whole thing. That's what I want the loser doing. That's my third pick here in the punishment draft.
I like that, especially if you got a league where nobody can sing. Because if you got a league where one guy can sing,
most people can't sing.
yes. But you're gonna, if it's one of those where it's a punishment if they can't sing. If they can sing, then it's like, all right, they got to go perform 3 songs and look great at the bar in front of everybody.
Then maybe you do. How about let's just call this the performance punishment?
Either
Why
that
not
or
stand-up comedy.
Pick songs first, second, and third. Pick a song, maybe.
There you go. I like that.
Because then you can pick something that at least is like out of their vocal range or ridiculous,
or they could rap or country,
exactly.
Or a genre they may not be ready for. Yes.
Or a song they don't even know, and then
yes,
God knows how that would go.
Exactly.
I like that one. For my next one, I'm going to go with a calendar shoot. And if you want to do a risque calendar shoot as well, more power to you. But then what could be fun with this is, we talked about charity before, is you could even sell those to the buddies and, whoever the loser is, sell them for, $10 a pop, $20 a pop, whatever that turns a profit. And then you donate that money to charity or something like that, I know everyone in every league is definitely going to be buying the calendar that winds up being produced and using that for the next year. But I thought that'd be a funny one to put up somewhere of, you got to do a calendar shoot, throw that together, print that off, and then everyone's got it hanging around. And whenever you go over their house, you just look at, oh, yeah, there's, July where I'm wearing a cowboy hat and a Speedo or something like that, something ridiculous. So I think that's another fun one to throw in there as well.
Yeah, I think the stuff that lasts forever is the best.
Yep.
Whether it's a video, picture, memory, whatever, calendar, and that brings me to my fourth pick. And listen, I'm not joining a league that does this, but I'm part of some very serious leagues that people would probably take part in. It's the tattoo. I like the idea. It would scare me if I ever lost a league that had to do a tattoo. But I love the leagues that are brave enough to do that, and that have families that are accepting that they are willing to do that. I don't have any tattoos. Yeah, that's very true. Usually they're not in places that are visible. But man, if you're the worst person in that league and you have like 5, 6, 7 tattoos starting to build up, now you have like a leg sleeve of just like things you didn't pick. All the power to the people that do that. But yeah, that's a classic. I love the tattoo.
Yeah, that's always a funny one. But like you said, you got to have some committed people in your league.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, come week 8, 9, 10 of the year, the guy that's one in whatever, he might find himself in the witness protection program at some point to try to avoid getting out of that punishment. My next one I'll go with is always a fun one, is some sort of a food challenge. In my punishment league this year, I mentioned last week's podcast, Jonathan Taylor was one of a number of poor picks that I made in that league that almost cost me having to face the punishment of doing the hot chip challenge. Yeah, whether it's the hot chip challenge or if you've got a local bar that's got a hot wing challenge or something like that, signing your buddy up for some sort of challenge that involves them eating a ridiculous food, I think is always a fun punishment that some people will have to suffer. So that's one I'm in favor of as well. I think that could certainly be fun.
Yeah, I've witnessed some people do that hot chip challenge, and it is a punishment. It is.
Yes.
It looks horrible. Yeah, I don't handle spicy well. Mild wings are as spicy as I'll go. So that would set me back. I might have to sit the year out the next year. I will take my last pick, and I will go with just a classic, something that everyone can do and shouldn't have a problem with, and that is just paying the winner's dues for next year. Very simple. Everyone knows, hey, Sean's playing for free because Colin had to pay his way in. Gets right to the point, makes winning feel that much better, makes losing feel that much worse, and that's it.
Yeah, that's always a good one as well. And that's one where it's a punishment where nobody gets embarrassed or anything like that.
Right.
If you've got a league that maybe it's not quite full of extroverts, that could be a fun punishment that you do where, the loser puts in an extra buy-in that the winner gets or pays the dues for the winner the next year, something else where they got to buck up some extra money. For my last one, I'll go with one that we used in my punishment league a couple of years ago. I was that kid you learned about in math class because I was the one that actually went out and got what the punishment was. We took the loser and pelted him with tomatoes. And the way we figured out how many tomatoes we would get was we took the losses he had on the season, which was like 11, multiplied that by 9 with the other 9 people in the league. So I went out and got 99 tomatoes, set them on my balcony so they could get a little extra sun in them before the draft. Nice. And then after we drafted, we went outside. My buddy was a good sport too. He put on a white sleeveless shirt and some goggles. And we went into the parking lot of my apartment complex and pelted him with tomatoes. And that was fun. especially because they were rotting at that time as well. So it's not like they were fresh and hard. They were soft at that point. So it's not like anyone got hurt in the process, but that's a fun one. Classic punishment that goes back to medieval times is pelting people with rotten fruit. So, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Bring that to your fantasy league if you're looking for something simple and fun.
Yes, just make sure you get enough tomatoes.
Yes. And that's why we did however losses they had multiplied by people in the league. So the way the math broke down with it was, he lost 11 times. Everyone in the league has 11 tomatoes they can throw at him. So that's how the math broke down. And then that's a little extra motivation to keep playing through the league that year is, okay, I'm not making the playoffs this year, but maybe I can squeak out a win in my final week of the season and get hit with 9 fewer tomatoes.
Yeah, no, that adds up very quickly. I like that one a lot. I'm sure we'll post this somewhere at the Fly FF Pod. We'll have a breakdown. Let us know some punishments that you guys like to do, and let us know who won the punishment draft here, Sean or I. What punishments stack up the best? Sean, I thought this was a great podcast. We kept it light. Obviously, we're waiting for some NFL news here. Training camp is right around the corner, a couple weeks away. We're recording this on Tuesday, July 11th. Thanks for hopping on tonight. I hope everyone that watched and listened had a great time. As always, the Fly Fantasy Football Podcast will be on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. Any closing remarks for any commissioners out there?
Stand your ground is what I'll say. Because like we talked before a couple times about people complaining, and you're not going to make everyone happy. If you know it's the right decision at the end of the day, whether to uphold a trade, even though people don't think it's fair, stand your ground and don't just cave to the pressure of, the small but loud voices in your league.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And know who's in your league. If you're starting a league and you want to be commissioner, don't invite the guy that everyone, knows is going to complain. Make sure you've got an airtight group of guys and girls out there that you think will be a league that could last a lifetime. Always good to have, returning players every year. Looking forward to next week for the Commissioner Think Tank Part 2. Can't wait to listen to that. I will be at the shore down in the Jersey Shore, Sea Isle City. So I'll make sure to pop on the podcast with my toes in the sand. Everybody else, have a good rest of the week and take it easy.